Hi, my name is Venkatesh Hariharan, and I'm very happy to speak at this event called the Great FOSS Shift. Uh, and I'd like to thank Karki and Satish for inviting me to speak at this event. I've been following the work of VGLUG for a very long time, and I'm a big supporter and admirer of VGLUG. So I'm particularly happy to be speaking at this event. I wish I could have been there in person, but that be that as it may. Uh, Satish asked me to speak about the corporate world and the open source community and how they can work together. So let me just jump into it right away. Uh, Recently, there was a study done by the University of Toronto and Harvard University, which looked at estimating the economic value of free and open source software. And that study found that if all the open source software that is being used were to be replaced by the equivalent proprietary software, the replacement value would be about $4 trillion. They also looked at the value that it creates for society and estimated that the collective value of open source software is roughly about $8.8 trillion, and that is trillion with a T. Uh, For comparison sake, if you look at India's GDP, it is about $4 trillion. So that just gives you a picture of how important free and open source software is in the global ecosystem. Uh, we spoke to Professor Frank Nagel, who's one of the researchers of this particular study, and we also did a study here in India. We tried to quantify the value of free and open source software in India, and it was very very challenging for an unusual reason because what has happened in the last several years is that open source and free software has become the de facto standard. So many of the organizations that we spoke to uh, did not even compare the value of open source software as against proprietary software. They told us that this is the default standard and therefore we are using it. Some of the startups that we spoke to, uh, when we looked at their technology stacks, pretty much everything was being built on top of open source. And these startups told us that because open source is available freely, except when you want to pay for support, we chose to go with open source software because if you have raised about 3-4 crore rupees for starting this particular company, we cannot afford to spend a lot of money on technology and buying proprietary licensed software, which is very very expensive. So we have used open source software to so that we can quickly get started, get up and running, and try out our products in the market. So, the study that we did with the National Law School was titled The Rise of FOSS in India, and it had some amazing findings. Zerodha was one of the few organizations that actually tracked the value that they have saved by using open source software. And they said that we have saved about roughly about $10 million, which is, I would say, about 800 crore rupees by using open source software. Uh, we spoke to the Kerala Information Technology in Education KITE program, and they said that we have used open source software to save roughly about 3,000 crore rupees for the state of Kerala by using open source software. Uh, so you see these kind of examples. You see that uh, the way in which open source software is being used is kind of becoming all pervasive. And this reminded me of a saying by Professor Mark Weiser, who was a scientist at Xerox PARC. And he said, any great technology any technology becomes really great when it disappears into the fabric of our lives. So today, people are using FOSS without really even thinking about it. It has become the de facto standard. And you look at any other great technology, like let's say your light bulb or your computers, you just simply have now taken it for granted and you start using it. So at this particular stage of your career, many of you may be starting off your career, maybe some of you are making a switch into the IT industry. I want to also highlight some really interesting examples and case studies that I came across. So one of my friends teaches at the Pimpri Chinchwad College of Engineering in Pune, close to Pune, and he said that two of his students have been hired at a package of 65 lakhs because these students were using and maintaining or contributing back to some Apache packages that were critical for the Uber ride hailing company. Similarly, another company, another example I came across was a student from Jadavpur University who was hired at a package of about 1 crore rupees by Meta because he was the maintainer for an Apache package which was very critical to Meta's operations. Meta and Facebook are, of course, one and the same. So these are, I think, small examples of how open source software has kind of become a leveler in terms of the fact that even if you're not a student from IIT Madras or IIT Bombay or one of the tier one colleges in India, because you have contributed back to the open source community, because you're doing something within the open source community, and you gained a reputation for yourself, you can get salaries which are offered only to, say, the IITs and IIMs and others. So so I'll also touch a little bit about how companies can use open source and what kind of relationship they should maintain with the open source community. Uh, in the course of the study that we did with which the National Law School did, called The Rise of FOSS in India, we found that many companies have started to even contribute back to the open source community and listing out the kind of projects that they do. So Zerodha does that. Um, Razorpay has opensource.razorpay.com. Uh, so I think this is really a healthy trend, and I wish that more and more Indian companies start contributing back to the open source community. One of the great things about the open source community is that it is truly a global commons, and what that means is that my usage of open source does not diminish your usage of open source. Your usage of open source does not diminish my usage of open source. Elinor Ostrom, who's a Nobel Prize winner in economics, defined public goods as goods that are non-rivalrous and non-excludable. So, in other words, if I have a piece of land, I can exclude you from using that piece of land by putting up a fence around it. Uh, if But with open source software you cannot do that. It's a global commons where I can contribute, say, 10,000 lines of code, you contribute 20,000 lines of code, somebody else contributes 1 lakh lines of code. We all kind of pull it into the common software that we are building, and in that process we are making ourselves richer and richer and richer. So this is something that is really really unique. I hope that we start working on making each other richer by collaborating and sharing open source software. And I would say that finally I would say that uh, John Lennon had these immortal words which really represent open source and free software beautifully, and he said that his song was called Imagine, and he said that you may think that I am a dreamer, but I am not the only one. Someday you will join me, and the world will be as one. So, in a very tortured geopolitical situation where everybody seems to be, pulling in different directions, the magic of free and open source software is that it brings everybody together. So, and it's truly making the world one by creating software that everybody can use, by creating software and technology that benefits all of society, not just a few rich elite few. So with that, let me just stop here and thank Villupuram GLUG and all of you for having me here, and I wish VGLUG and all of you all the best. Thank you so much.